We have Denis Makrushin. So, hi Denis, how are you?
Hi colleagues, hi guys, awesome, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't manage to compose the song about you, sorry, but at some moment probably I will. And Denis, what will you talk about?
Today we'll talk about the middle of DevOps is a DevSecOps, and my talk will be about the fails. Yeah, so I'm feeling your applause, colleagues, I feel it. So let me share my screen firstly. Let me turn on my presentation. And here it is. So, colleagues, before, just to check that you're still in interactive mode, but I'm sure after the song you're still in interactive mode. And I just want to ask you, definitely you have a chat somewhere, yes? Not in the Zoom probably, but you have some chat. And if you are dev or operation or quality assurance or any colleague who involved in development and operation sector and domain, so please send me a plus in the chat or somewhere, or maybe you can send me in the Twitter if you want, or you can send me in WhatsApp, but you have my number. Okay, send me anywhere. And then next question for you colleagues is, if you are security engineer, if you somehow affect the security process, send me something, not a plus. You can send me 2 pluses or this crazy smile in the chat, or maybe in the Twitter, or maybe in LinkedIn. And let's assess how many people involved in security process here. And maybe after the presentation, we can estimate the numbers, who is the DevOps or who is the focused on creation and who is the focused on security, on not destroying, but on the safety and trustworthy processes. But I'm sure that if you ask any kind of audiences and technical audiences, and especially this audience, we will see something like this statistic. This statistic, I think it's just from my mind. It's not like official statistic maybe, but if you ask colleagues to send the pluses, you will see this balance, that almost all of us, we are creating something, but only small piece of the experts focused on securing aspects, sometimes on destroying the security process to make it more harder for external attacker. But if you are trying to assess the success of DevOps colleagues and security colleagues, or if you're trying to assess the number of successful case for security engineers or attackers, you will see the quite opposite statistic. Of course, it's not official statistic, it's just something like from my mind again, yeah, but still actual, I think, because the cybersecurity, the topic that we will talking about here, will be about the asymmetry. And cybersecurity has the fundamental problem, is the asymmetry. This industry has asymmetry because if you're an attacker, you have enough time to organize the reconnaissance process. You have enough time to understand your target before you start your attack. And you need to be successful only once. But if you are a security engineer, you need to understand to understand who is your attacker when attacks, and it's all when he appears in your infrastructure. That's why this is a disbalance in the industry. But this topic is about how we are, as a security guys and security engineers or DevSecOps colleagues, how we can be the part of this attack and how we can be the victim, because usually the victim is not the guys who focused on security. Victim is just something HR people, financial people, but not security. But in this case, I will describe you a few cases from my experience how development security operation experts or DevSecOps can be a victim. And I want to describe you how we are as a security engineers, and also we are as a DevOps experts, can increase the attack surface, even if we want to decrease it. And I want to start my talk from this is a story. It's not a story, it's a real life story. few years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was focused on healthcare security assessment. I've tried to understand what happens in healthcare organizations. I found multiple critical vulnerabilities in different kind of healthcare and medical devices and medical organizations. And I've tried to submit these vulnerabilities to stakeholders, but always the answer was something like, okay, thank you for this RCE, but what I have to do with that? And I just start to look what maybe I do something wrong, because I communicate with the non-relevant people. I submitted to medical staff, medical administrators, medical IT services. But if you're trying to understand who is the developer of this vulnerable system, you will see that it's not a medical personnel, it's not even a medical colleagues who understand the problem of the medical systems. And BSIMM is a standard that describes you how to create your DevSecOps process and how to create secure software development lifecycle. According to the statistic, you will see that the problem not in medicine, the problem not in healthcare organizations, but problem in developers who provide the software for healthcare organizations. And from this thing, I start to look at this problem different way. I decide maybe as a security researcher, I have to focus not on users of the vulnerable products, but on the developers and on the DevSecOps engineers. And I start to dig deeper in this field that we call DevOps. So when I faced with the field that we call DevOps, I've just faced with the new term like Agile development, so Agile Security also. I didn't say any Agile, but maybe you can explain me after the presentation what is Agile means. But I Googled that 3 principles of Agile exist. First principle is do not reinvent it. Second principle is do it incrementally. So do not reinvent the bicycle. And if you want to upgrade your bicycle, just check your upgrades and then upgrade it. And of course, automation. Automation should be everywhere. You have to replace your people. You have to remove the human from the process, and you need to automate it. So, in these 3 principles of Agile brings new things in our security development lifecycle. First, new processes. Of course, everyone knows that CI/CD, now it appears everywhere. So no waterfall anymore. Agile principle brings new processes. These processes should be supported by new people. New people like DevOps, yes, is a new term. New, like 10 years ago, this term was exotic term. And DevOps, so new dinos, new people, new experts requires new knowledges, and those experts brings new tools. So these new things completely increase the attack surface. And from the security researcher point of view, first principle in processes. Processes looks like something strange if you are a security researcher, because if you join the organization with Agile principles, if you join the organization with CI/CD, DevOps, SecOps, etc., you will see this sodomy, because everyone shared the responsibilities. Who is the dev? Who is responsible for development stage? Who is responsible for operation stage? Where's the security? Who is responsible for security? So from the security researcher perspective, the wrong established process of Agile can bring more problems. But it's okay. But automation, or third principle of development and operations, brings much more interesting stuff in your infrastructure and your daily routine. So if you look what kind of tools or what kind of frameworks appears in your infrastructure and life cycle of these tools, you will see a lot of strange products. So platforms appears. New platforms brings new frameworks. New frameworks brings new technologies. These technologies creates something like new tools, new scripts, new automation scenarios. Then some of them will be removed from the market, new technology appears, etc., etc. So from the automation point of view, all of these toolkits, all of these frameworks, all of these platforms completely increase the attack surface. And what is attack surface? Let's just describe it based on this simple scenario. Simple scenario because I think it's academical picture, but they're not academia, just to explain what is attack surface formally. let's imagine the simple network where host 0 connects to the host 1 or host 2 using by the firewall. So firewall, it's just like a middle point that divides your packet filter. Simple case, yes? So what is attack surface? If you are attacker who compromised the host 0, you need to perform some number of steps. And if the firewall will be switched off, you have to perform one kind of like picture above. You will see that you need to perform few number of steps to achieve the crown or jewels on host 1 or host 2. But if you will switch on your firewall, you need to compromise the firewall itself, and you need to perform another number of steps. So it's a picture below. And attack surface formally is a graph of these steps that you need to perform to achieve your goal, to achieve your crown or jewels, to compromise your targets. So let's begin to do this picture with the tools. Before you are a security researcher or DevSecOps expert joined the infrastructure, you already establish some processes. Yes, your product will be delivered from the code. When your developer creates something in IDE, then this code will be tested using some QA experts, and then this code appears in operation infrastructure, in staging infrastructure, or production infrastructure. But if you are trying to involve security engineers, those security engineers will say to you that you need, on the stage, when you're developer creating the code, you need to include static analysis and security analysis of the code. Then, when the code will be produced and delivered in the binaries or in final version of the pre-final version of the product, you need to organize dynamic analysis, dynamic security analysis of this product. Then, when your product is implemented in production, not staging, but production, you need to organize something like the bug bounties, or maybe continuous penetration testing, red teaming. But your security guy, your security consultant or security engineer will bring new processes and will inject his tools, his mindset, his processes to this pipeline. And it means that this pipeline will be bigger, and the tool set that will be used in this pipeline will be increased. So attack surface will be increased. And if you're trying to scan any enterprise network, if you're working for enterprise organization, if you're trying to scan the internal network, you will see a lot of assets and PCs, or maybe some resources that are available internally. And this is a graph of, I think, attack surface. This is a typical picture that illustrates the attack surface of typical enterprise network. It means that each asset is a potential target, is a potential entry point for attacker to crown or jewels to some secrets. But if you're trying to scan external network perimeter, you will see, I think, something the same. Because a lot of people who focused on DevOps or administration, they're trying to implement tools. Those tools then will be replaced by another tools, but you can forget the IP, or you forgot to switch off your dashboard of the tool, etc., etc. A lot of forgotten assets. And these assets, they keeps your secret, your organization secret. And this is a real graph of attack surface of typical enterprise level organization. Let's divide all assets of this attack surface graph on the three main categories. First category, related to the development stage when you code your product. Second category is a quality assurance category, when you try to assess the code quality or security of this code. And the second stage is the operation stage, when you're all kind of solutions that are responsible for operations of your IT product. And let's combine a few examples of each interesting cases that attacker can exploit in each stage of product maturity. But before we do that, it's a question for you, colleagues, a question about open source and commercial assets. When you work daily, yes, when you go for your SDLC, what do you prefer more? Do you prefer, I'm sure that here's a lot of open source fans, me too, but what about your preference when about the commercial security solutions in your pipeline? Not only security, but whole solutions. If you think that commercial security assets and commercial security vendors should be in SDLC, I think you can applaud me right now, but I didn't hear it, but you can share with me the plus plus in the chat, plus in the Twitter, if you totally support that commercial security solutions should be in SDLC. And my opinion, my personal opinion, that it should be, because if we're talking about the business, not just open source solutions, but something like the product, if you develop the product, you need to use commercial vendors for security, not only for security, because you share responsibility for this asset, for this product. You share the responsibility with a vendor, and that means that you can deliver to him some bugs reports, vulnerability reports, etc. But in case of open source, who's responsible? Community? Community is something like the liquid term. Yes, you need to choose a responsible person. That's why I prefer personally the commercial solutions in SDLC. And if we will start to talk about the commercial solutions, you will see that there are some typical vendors, or not just typical vendors, but big vendors in your infrastructure. And SonarQube, of course, you know what is a SonarQube. This is the SAST, I think, static application security, not only security, but code quality and security testing toolkit that allows you to scan your code for bugs, for code style, and for vulnerabilities. Yes, it has some checks for vulnerabilities. And you see that if you're trying to scan the network, to scan the internet for installed SonarQubes, you will see the following statistic, that SonarQube installations exposed everywhere, and sometimes it exposed without any authentication. And if you're trying to look in, even if you need to find some login and password and input login and password to log in there, you can also use the techniques that attackers call GitHub scraping or open source intelligence tools. And if you input something like SonarQube and pass, keyword pass in GitHub, for example, you will see a lot of scripts that developers shared for their SonarQubes installed in commercial organization where the developers is working, but on their personal accounts on GitHub. And you can scrap some secrets, some login and passwords, then to compromise these passwords and get access to the SonarQube installations inside of the organization. Another interesting scenario when this solution, it's not only about the SonarQube, it's also about any solutions that could be integrated in CI/CD. It has some automation capabilities. It has some APIs or command line integrations. And if you're trying to extract from the manuals and guides of this solution, of this product, some keywords that could be responsible for authentication or authorization, you will see that in case of Sonar, you can extract sonar.password and search for the script that use this command line integration to log in. So it means that you can steal some sensitive data or secrets. But it's not a problem just SonarQube. No, it's a problem any solutions, and especially security solutions. If you open the Magic Quadrant and Magic of the Gartner, you will see that top 10 solutions in static application security testing. You can choose arbitrary solution from the list, for example, check marks, and then you still able to have to find some exposed check marks installations. Some of them will be restricted from, you need to authorize this there. But sometimes you just can use registration form, register your account, then get access to the intellectual property of the target, or you can use this check marks to scan your own code. So that's funny, it's a difficult scenario, but it's still possible. And if you will use some GitHub for that, GitHub scraping techniques to extract some data, you also will be able to extract some automation scripts for check marks. I think, yeah, it's the same scenario. And based on these stories, we need to conclude something. What we have to do as a security researchers or development operation experts, we have to assess the control. We have to assess and control our attack surface. And to do that, we need exactly what attackers do with our infrastructure. First of all, we need to use open source intelligence to understand what kind of repositories available and related to our product. Then we can scan some exposed assets of our infrastructure and remove any critical stuff from the perimeter. Then we can use, for example, Shodan or maybe Census or any kind of search engines to find something sensitive and find something like the secrets related to our infrastructures or related to developers, etc., etc. So we need to control attack surface. But what about the open source solutions? And in case of open source, we still have more interesting examples because, as I said, open source has no formal responsibilities, and community sometimes can't save it. Let's start from the case of Flower. Flower, I'm not sure what is that. I just, as a security researcher, I'm trying to find some interesting and perspective targets with a big attack surface. And when I Googled something like DevOps most usable tools, I've received that Flower is a framework that allows you to organize the queue of your script and manage the queue. This queue can contain some sensitive data in the RAM memory of your server and can operate using some sensitive data. So your scripts get direct access to sensitive data and you can manage the queue. So it's like my understanding what Flower does. But I'm trying to assess this framework from the security perspective, and is it vulnerable or not? So before I did that, I just assessed the attack surface, how many flowers exposed online, and you see the statistic that there are almost 1,000 flowers exposed worldwide. Then I've tried to look for vulnerabilities, and I've realized that there are no any input fields. It means that product is quite simple from the logic point of view, from the business logic point of view, and only one input field. And for me, it was a deja vu, because few months ago, before this, I've also assessed my router, and it also has one input field, and this input field was vulnerable for DOM-based cross-site scripting. So I was able to inject JavaScript code. Then when I start dig deeper in the router, I identified different kind of vulnerabilities, critical vulnerabilities, backdoors, passwords, hard-coded passwords, remote code execution vulnerabilities. So deja vu. the same with the Flower. And I decide, okay, if it's a problem only of development and operation solutions, maybe I need to look at security open source solutions before, because if security guys do mistakes in their products, maybe it's more interesting. And here, I decide to look, but before, not decide, but in my previous position, I was trying to implement something like the security operation orchestration platform, the special platform that allows you to manage security scenarios in your infrastructure, create a ticket if you found some malicious code on this machine, remove this machine using the firewall, or isolate this machine, etc., etc. So it's a security scenarios of operations using different kind of products. In open source, only one product. I think 2 years ago it was only one product, Patrol, that allows you to download it from the GitHub and use it as is. But I decided to replace the front end of the product, and those engines was the product has 3 main components: is a manager, dashboard, engines, different kind of solutions, for example, Nmap, antiviruses, etc., in Docker containers, and that's it. You can use front end to get access to engines and to launch your scenarios. But when I start to replace the front end, I realized that Nmap, the container with default tool Nmap, is able to is received any data from your dashboard as is, without any sanitization or without any escaping of this data. So anyway, you are able to inject some arbitrary command in a Nmap container. And that means that if these containers are exposed, and the security containers exposed online, anyone can get access to your infrastructure. It was obvious that you need to sanitize the data from your dashboard, and I was wondering why developers not care about the obvious things. But when I start to look at the code of this container, I saw the comment that the developers say that you need to do it by yourself, colleagues, if you want to sanitize the data. And it means that he aware about it, but he shared his responsibility with the users. So, and I'm not sure how many containers exposed, but I think it's an interesting scenario how to compromise the security solution. By the way, about containers, all of us use the containers in our pipeline, and sometimes it's if our product is real secured, if we think that we implemented all security controls, if we implemented security software development lifecycle. Anyway, if you use the container from the wrong place, you are able to compromise the product. For example, in this case, this container with misconfigured Nginx server can accept any kind of headers, and you can insert arbitrary header, and this header will be injected in your request, and then will be forward to your application without sanitization. And it seems that not critical. Okay, it's a misconfiguration without critical impact. But if your application received the header and cached the header in the cache, if you have cache, or if your application received the header and insert the header as is without sanitization, it means that you can realize different scenarios like cache poisoning attacks or cross-site scripting attacks, etc. And another idea behind the non-trustful third parties, like containers with vulnerable applications, let me share some example about security colleagues who didn't care about I think the basic rules. When we did a penetration testing for organization with the security, with maturity and with real maturity in the product term, in SDLC terms, we did the following scenario. We created a Jira ticket in Jira, in ticketing system, and we insert in this ticket the link that if you click on it, we received some notifications that someone clicked on your link. And we creating the following ticket that, colleagues, your product is vulnerable or something like that. Just please help me with this vulnerability. When we publish it, after 2 days, we received notifications that someone clicked on our link. And he started to organize the reconnaissance of the where he appears. It's not like opportunistical click. It was real click by security engineer, because after that, our our ticket was concluded and considered by service as a phishing. It means that security colleagues clicks on the link. I'm not sure, maybe they did it in virtual machines, maybe they did it from their workstations, but it means that if we will try to implement some phishing attack, real phishing attack, we are able to compromise the security expert. So based on this story, what are the main conclusions for us? First of all, if we are vendors, not only security vendors who provide the security products, of course, if you are aware about security and deliver security product, you need to be aware. But anyway, if we are vendors, we need not only to implement security software development lifecycle but also educate our users. It means that we need always to scan the perimeters for our products. If we see that our users, our clients use our product non-properly, we have to send them recommendation that do not implement dashboards of my SonarQube in internet, or do not implement dashboards of my security solutions in the internet. Do not expose it. So, and we have to assess the threat landscape related to our product. If we are security engineers or development and operation and DevSecOps, we have to also do some red teaming and pen testing of our infrastructure. We have to not wait some attackers in our infrastructure. And that's why we need to assess the attack surface that we mentioned before. We have to create our code of conduct, how to process the links from external parties. And of course, as we said, we have to scan our Docker containers, any open source solutions, any third parties, before we will use it in our SDLC pipeline. How we can do that? We can use, for example, CodeQL and from the GitHub, when you can add some third parties or open source solutions that you used in your development lifecycle. And this lgtm.com service will monitor your infrastructure, will monitor your third-party components, and will send you some information if it has a problem. And the main thing from this presentation, so if you are development security operation expert, or even if you are security engineer, one day you can be a target. One day you can be compromised. Even if you are a penetration tester or if you are a red teamer, it's still possible that you can be a target and you can be a victim. That's why let's educate. Let's educate not only people who are not involved in security, but let's educate also security people. That's it. Thank you, colleagues, for your time. I will be waiting for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And is there any questions? I assume, just a second, there is. Well, no, there unfortunately is no questions for a while. So thank you. All I would ask